I can do it all, I will never fall. It's the Renaissance, you know that I got the mother sauce, man. You know I'm the boss, I know what it costs. Have you won a loss? I'm so versatile, yeah, I'm a Renaissance, man. I can do it all, I will never fall. It's the Renaissance, you know that I got the mother sauce, man. You know I'm the boss, I know what it costs. Have you won a loss? I'm so versatile, yeah, I'm a Renaissance, man.
Congratulations, brother.
And here we go. And here it is, another episode of the Hangar Hangout. What's good, people? Glad to have y'all here. You know what? It's a perfect day to have a hangout because today was the official start of mandatory mini camp, and I see a bunch of people losing their goddamn minds all over Twitter because of Hassan Reddick not showing up, Aaron Rodgers not showing up, etc. So you know what? It's fine. We're going to talk about it tonight. Tonight, I got Brandyn Pokrass with me of Jets XFactor. He's going to go ahead and jump on here in a little bit. We're going to go ahead and talk about the Jets, talk about what's currently going on right now with the Jets, and, of course, what we think is going to happen with this team, throughout the season with the influx of talent that we now have. But before I get into it, for those individuals who are freaking out about like, oh, man, Joe D dropped the bag again, blah, 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 I think a lot of people kind of missed the fact that Joe D confirmed with freaking Hassan Reddick beforehand, before making that trade, that he was willing to come over here as a Jet and play to go ahead and work for a bag next year. But don't take my word for it. I'm just an individual that's just, I'm a fan, right? So here it is right here, the report per se, as to exactly the terms of the Hassan Reddick coming in, brought to you by the Connor Hughes.
3-day mandatory minicamp. 2 guys are not here, both unexcused. Let's start with the defensive guy, Hassan Reddick.
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise, I think, for the Jets that they're not here. Robert Saleh said last week he expected him to be in attendance for mandatory minicamp. He is not because Reddick wants a new contract. He's paid $15 million annually. He's somebody who has the 4th most sacks in the NFL since 2020, and he wants to be paid like the guys like Nick Bosa, like Brian Burns, like Josh Allen, which is a contract near 28, 29, 30 million per year. Now, what's interesting about this current situation is that when the Jets traded for Hassan Reddick, they made it very clear to him that they were not going to redo his contract before the year. He was going to play out on this deal, and then they were going to reassess where things were after the season. If Reddick played as the Jets expected him to, he was going to get that mega money extension either from the Jets, which the Jets were hoping for, or elsewhere. But aside from what they were going to do before the year, it was just going to be minor adjustments. Think about what the Giants did with Darius Slayton, where they added some additional incentives into his contract to make some more money. That's all they were willing to do with Reddick, and he was on board with that, so much so that I talked to multiple sources who said he told people within the Jets building, or multiple sources inside the building who talked to Reddick, said that he told them that his plans were to attend the off-season program and minicamp. Well, something changed, obviously, between now and then because he skipped all of the off-season program, all of OTAs, and now he is a no-show for minicamp. So this is absolutely something worth monitoring moving forward because the Jets really have no idea when Reddick's going to show up.
Robert Saleh does say he expects him to be ready to go for training.
This isn't a guy you're worried about shape.
Yeah,
he's going to show up in shape. Yeah.
Let's.
So there you have it. So for all the individuals who are freaking out, talking about how Joe D got, et cetera, like first and foremost, Hassan Reddick would not be here, would not be a New York Jet if not for that agreement being put in play. And I, for one, feel a specific way about it. I've been kind of vocal about it all over social media. I don't think this is a big deal. A lot of people are freaking out. I don't think the Jets should go ahead and sign him. But you know what? I digress. At the end of the day, I want to go ahead and bring on tonight's guest. We're going to have Brandyn Pokrass of Jets XFactor share with us what he thinks about the current situation. Without further ado, hey, what's up, Brandyn? How you doing, man?
How you doing? Thank you for having me on tonight.
Oh, man, easy day. Appreciate you for making the time to jump on here and talk Jets football with us, man. Kind of a fun night, right? A fun day for you to be getting on social media or on a podcast and talk about the Jets. Let's just get right down to it. First and foremost, Aaron Rodgers, no shows in Mando Mini Camp. Is this really the story the weirdos are making it out to be? What's your take on the whole Aaron Rodgers no show?
I mean, look, objectively, this is a guy that's been at every single OTA practice. It comes out that he was at media day yesterday. He got his physical done. And this is something that, the coaching staff knew about. Saleh said as much today. And I think what it comes down to is, especially when you're dealing with a figure like Aaron Rodgers, who inherently is going to bring the controversy with him, whether he is actually causing it or not. when you have something like this, it's a very easy target. And it's especially an easy target when, unfortunately, the semantics of it aren't communicated in the best way, right?
Right.
You have Robert Saleh conveying it in a fashion where it's like, oh, we know where he is, but we're going to find him. And, it's unexcused, but we still knew this was going to happen in advance. And it's just a bunch of crossed wires for something that really is it's a nothing burger, right? It's not something that should garner every national NFL reporter and a bunch of people chiming in. And, there's always going to be funny jokes that people get off. And I enjoy those, especially when it surrounds a guy like Rodgers, because there's some very funny people out there. But there's certain people that take it seriously and are like, oh, the Jets are screwed. LOL, Jets. This is a guy that, once again, people aren't reading the entire situation. The team knew where he was at. This is just a situation where the exact wording wasn't the best, and now it causes something that shouldn't be a controversy to become now something that people think is a controversy when it isn't anything at all. It's just stupid, right? Because he's going to be at training camp. He's going to be the team's quarterback. He's been at every other offseason program. So what? He's not at 2 practices that are that are mandatory, and the team knows about it. It's nothing.
Yeah, I'm with you on this, man. When it came out that Rodgers wasn't there, at first I was like, oh, okay, that's weird. I wonder why. I didn't think anything negative, just why is he not there? Then, of course, Saleh kind of broke it down and talked about how, like, yeah, they knew about it already. It had already been explained to us that there was a prior engagement that he was already committed to. It's funny to me because people are making a big deal about this, but people forget that Tom Brady, in the year he won the Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, missed 11 days in training camp. 11 days in training camp. And you know what? It wasn't deemed to be a big deal. Like it was quiet. Media didn't run with it. And this is another aspect of how you can see how the New York media and, of course, the Jets haters find every opportunity to go ahead and claw onto any bit of negativity just to go ahead and discredit what the New York Jets have built over the last several years. But I'm with you, man. I think it's a non-factor. Aaron Rodgers is freaking Aaron Rodgers. Yes, would I have preferred he was at Mando Mini Camp? I would admit, yes. I would love for him to have been there. But at the end of the day, he's Aaron freaking Rodgers. This is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He knows how to play football. He's proven he's committed to the team by being here throughout OTAs. He was there at Mando Mini Camp yesterday, and it wasn't a surprise. He had made them aware of the situation well in advance. So I'm with you on this one, man. I think it's a non-story, but a lot of the weirdos are looking for engagement, and of course they're going to get it because, I mean, why not, right? There's an easy opportunity for them to go ahead and get a couple of extra clicks because, as they already know, Jets fans are the most passionate individual fan base on this planet, and even though we know it's clickbait, we're still going to go ahead and give you our 2 cents. So, once again, they got their free engagement from us with something as minuscule as this particular story. But
yeah, it's like, I mean, to add to that point, it's like kicking a hornet's nest, right? Everyone knows it's not a story, but you have the few people out there that put out a tweet where they probably know the type of engagement they're going to get, and everyone still engages with it in the first place. It's something where, look, if the Jets season is ending because Aaron Rodgers doesn't attend mandatory minicamp, this team has a bunch of other issues that would need to be addressed. Point blank.
That's facts. That is 100% facts. Now, another individual no-show today, right? Somebody who potentially may not show up in training camp. I don't know what the story is with him, but I just played a clip of Connor Hughes breaking down originally what was the agreement. The agreement was supposedly, for those of you that are just checking, I'll play the video one more time, but apparently Hassan Reddick was a no-show today at mandatory minicamp. He was also a no-show at OTAs, and apparently it's a surprise to the coaching staff and, of course, to Joe D and management, because they weren't expecting him to go ahead and act like this based off of what they had originally agreed upon. And for those of y'all just checking in, I'll play that video one more time before we go ahead and get Brandon's viewpoints on it.
3-day mandatory minicamp. Two guys are not here, both unexcused. Let's start with the defensive guy, Hassan Reddick.
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise, I think, for the Jets that they're not here. Robert Saleh said last week he expected him to be in attendance for mandatory minicamp. He is not because Reddick wants a new contract. He's paid $15 million annually. He's somebody who has the fourth most sacks in the NFL since 2020, and he wants to be paid like the guys like Nick Bosa, like Brian Burns, like Josh Allen, which is a contract near 28, 29, 30 million per year. Now, what's interesting about this current situation is that when the Jets traded for Hassan Reddick, they made it very clear to him that they were not going to redo his contract before the year. He was going to play out on this deal, and then they were going to reassess where things were after the season. If Reddick played as the Jets expected him to, he was going to get that mega money extension either from the Jets, which the Jets were hoping for, or elsewhere. But aside from what they were going to do before the year, it was just going to be minor adjustments. Think about what the Giants did with Darius Slayton, where they added some additional incentives into his contract to make some more money. That's all they were willing to do with Reddick, and he was on board with that, so much so that I talked to multiple sources who said he told people within the Jets building, or multiple sources inside the building who talked to Reddick, said that he told them that his plans were to attend the offseason program and minicamp. Well, something changed obviously between now and then because he skipped all of the offseason program, all of OTAs, and now he is a no-show for minicamp. So this is absolutely something worth monitoring moving forward because the Jets really have no idea when Reddick's going to show up.
Robert Saleh does say he expects him to be ready to go for training
this isn't a guy you're worried about shape. He's going to show up in shape.
So there you have it, right? So Hassan Reddick originally, when he was traded for, knew that Joe Douglas had no intention of giving him a long-term contract. He was going to play on his current contract. And the agreement was, hey, at the end of the year, you're either going to have the stat lines padded enough for you to either get one from us or from another team. In my opinion, I really believe their intention was to go ahead and rent him for a year and let him get the contract somewhere next year, which I think is still his best bet to go ahead and get a payday because you're going to be having him next to Quinnen Williams, the best secondary he's ever had behind him, who's going to assist him in getting a couple of coverage sacks. I think it makes all the sense in the world for him to go ahead and line his ass up next to Quinnen Williams, feast out this year in your year 30 year, and get the bag next year. What is your take on it, man? What do you think changed from them having the agreement to now Mando Mini Camp? He's a no-show for Mando Mini Camp.
I think, and this is kind of similar to the Rodgers situation, at least for me, where I'm like, I'm not thinking it's a big deal right now. Obviously, we get the training camp and he's not still there. Completely different conversation. I think what it comes down to at the end of the day is, even with the salary that he has, right? Reddick's posed to make around $15 million this upcoming season. None of it's guaranteed. And especially for a guy that was a bit banged up last year, a guy that when he hits free agency, it's probably going to be his last big payday. You have to make sure that you are in every position possible to capitalize on your success. I'm someone that is very pro player. I'm someone that always wants players to get the biggest payday possible because things can change overnight in the NFL. You could be on top of the world and all of a sudden one injury later, now you're not making anywhere near what you were supposed to. So I think, Reddick not showing up, obviously it's weird, right? He tells the team, oh, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there.
Yep.
But now he isn't. At the same time, though, and nuance is important, I don't think it's a big deal because Reddick doesn't have a guaranteed contract. He probably wants a slight raise, probably wants, a year or two tacked on. All very doable things. But I think as a veteran player who knows he's going to be prepared for training camp, looking at the situation and saying, hey, why would I risk injury? Even as minuscule or small it may be, why would I risk that going into a year where my contract is not guaranteed? And I think that's just smart business, right? I think that's smart for a player that is trying to capitalize on what you said, the best secondary he's played with, playing alongside Quinnen Williams, playing alongside a rising Jermaine Johnson, and a very deep defensive line, playing alongside linebackers that are some of the best in football.
Yep.
It's just something where it's weird. It's very interesting that he says one thing and now it's the opposite. But at the end of the day, it is June 11th. If this is the situation on July 25th, 26th, and the Jets still don't know why Reddick isn't showing up to training camp, we are having a completely different conversation. but there's still a lot of time. Teams have these types of situations play out all the time. The good teams are able to solve it. The bad teams let it slide and let it leak into the season and take away from their possible success in the regular season. I'm very interested to see how the Jets let this play out, because they probably weren't inclined at first to sign Reddick to an extension. They probably were inclined to let this thing play out. But at the end of the day, tacking on a year or two to the Aaron Rodgers window where Reddick perfectly lines up with it, wouldn't be the end of the world. It's not like he's going to be the highest paid edge rusher in football. And honestly, if he performs the way he's been performing, he's going to be worth that money. So overall, I would say, Jets fans, I wouldn't stress about this until it gets to the end of July and training camp, when the season ramp up is really starting, because right now there's just so much time for this to get worked out.
Okay, so then I got to ask you, would you give him a contract extension to go ahead and make him happy?
I think it depends what his asking price is, right? Because if he's asking for 25, 30 mil, then it's like, I'm not sure, because you still have to pay Sauce. You have to pay Garrett. You have to pay Brees, who doesn't have that fifth-year option. You have to look at Jermaine. You have to decide between Michael Carter II and DJ Reed. There are plenty of extensions that need to get done. But if you're looking at, a $5 million raise for around 22, 23 mil, putting him near that, I think I was looking at Spot Track before the show, around that top 5, top 6 AAV value for an edge rusher. But it's really tacking on another year to that deal and then making that third year non-guaranteed, kind of similar to the deal he has now. I think that works. It's just about finding that middle ground between what Reddick probably wants, what the Jets probably want, because with the prior decisions they've made and the prior things that have happened with this franchise in the past few years in terms of good moves and bad moves, the cap situation isn't as ripe as it's usually been. It's not like the Jets can just extend everyone and call it a day. They're going to have some tough decisions to make, and they have to make sure that they get this Reddick thing right, because a slip up with this could mean you're losing both DJ Reed and Michael Carter II instead of retaining one.
And I think, yeah, and I think that's where I get a little bit uneasy, right? I look at the whole situation in terms of, you extend Huff, right? If this was going to be a situation where, we were going to bring in Reddick and this was going to happen, now in hindsight, I'm like, man, maybe we should have gone ahead and just given Huff the 17 or 18 million he was asking for from the Jets. It would have probably been more of a bang for our buck in terms of his youth. He's homegrown. He's beloved by the fan base. And we've seen him alongside of Quinnen Williams and this defense and know what he can go ahead and do. So I think if that was the case, I would get it. I personally look at the Hassan Reddick situation, man, and he's about to be 30 years old by the start of the season. He's a speed rusher where a lot of his production comes from his speed moves. Yes, he's got a plethora of moves in his arsenal he can use to benefit and get after the quarterback. But that 30-year-old number, man, we all know it's kind of like a pivot point, right, for specific position points, whether it's the running back position, the wide receiver position, the defensive end position. Those are those specialty positions where the speed starts to fade a little bit and they need to rely more so on the IQ. I'm not saying he doesn't have it, but to give him, 20, 25 mil between now and for the next 3 years, I worry about the impact of the other guys that we're trying to hold on to. And I think that's where, if you ask me, I think the Jets don't budge. I think Joe D holds fast, right? I don't think he's going to go ahead and sit out for the entire year. Again, he's going into his 30th year of life. And again, he only got one more bag in him. For him to waste a year of production that can potentially maximize that for him, I think would be dumb. I would hope his agent isn't whispering just ridiculousness in his ear, because you're going to throw away money when the whole purpose is to make money. I think the Jets should keep him as a one-year rental. I think the biggest benefactor of the defense getting better this year, while everybody's freaking out about Hassan Reddick, I think it's the offense. I really believe the addition of Mike Williams, of Tyron Smith, of Aaron Rodgers coming back, like I believe those are going to be more of an impactful component to our defense being better. because we've had a top 3 defense the last couple of years, and what has that done for us? If Hassan Reddick potentially doesn't play, what do we fall? We fall to maybe what, top 5, top 10. One thing I do know that this coaching staff is really, really good at is coaching defense. I feel more comfortable in going at it this year with what we currently have, seeing what McDonald brings to the table, and letting that offense make life easier for our defense. But I get what you're saying in terms of if the numbers make sense and everybody's happy. When you're looking at it from the player perspective, I can also understand that. I think for me, the frustration lies in you gave Joe D your word. You said this is what you were willing to do, and then now something has changed. That to me, I don't like that. That to me is a character concern or a character flaw in my eyes, which is why I'm even more hesitant now about paying him the money.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? So I think the Bryce Huff thing, and even to an extent the JFM and Quinton Jefferson thing, will be interesting to look at because, what does the hindsight look like once the season's over?
Right.
Does Huff have a breakout year with Philly? Does JFM continue to play at a high level? Because you might be able to look back at it and be like, all right, instead of trading for Reddick, you could have kept these two guys, and how does it look? But the Bryce Huff situation, there's so much gray with it because was Huff going to even want to return to the Jets, considering the way it seemed like they just simply didn't value him until it was too late, and there's no guarantee that they would have played him at that higher level. And then what is that? There's a lot of different factors with him because whenever I brought up the Bryce Huff situation in the offseason, I would get frustrated, not simply because they didn't sign him. It's because of the way they handled the situation year after year after year, where you could have got it done, where he was a bargain and would have been a complete bargain for multiple years, but you let it slide. And then last season, he has his breakout. You let it get to that point. You drafted Will McDonald, et cetera, et cetera. It's like it's beating a dead horse at this point. We all know how the situation went, and we all know the Jets should have handled it better. I think when it comes to their defense this year, though, it's going to be very interesting to see how things look when you actually have an offense that puts the defense in a position to simply attack, right? So many years, the Jets have had great defenses, but they haven't achieved that, I would say, full potential because they're not playing with a lead often. They're on 100%. Their heels, and they're having to defend. With the Mike Williams edition, with the Tyron Smith edition, with Garrett Wilson most likely taking another step with Aaron Rodgers, with Breece Hall actually having running lanes this year, I think you're going to see a Jets defense that is able to actually tee off on opponents. And because of that, Reddick could have a really, really big year, which in my eyes means there's no way he's missing time in the regular season. Agreed. There's no way he's missing games. It's just a matter of how do you get to that point? How do you get to that point where you're not causing a locker room mutiny or dysfunction because the one guy you traded for at the quote-unquote position of need on defense is causing issues before he's even played a snap for your team? It's a very interesting situation, and I'll reiterate that I don't feel too much concern with it right now, but it's something I'm definitely monitoring as we head towards training camp because, look, whether it's Will McDonald, whether it's Jermaine Johnson, Michael Clemens, Quinton Williams, the Jets have a ton of talent on their defensive line.
Facts.
Reddick is just that closer that is going to be
cherry
so
on top.
Important. Exactly.
That
the cherry on top, the closer that is going to be so important to their success. And I'm really interested to see how the team goes about handling what could be a very precarious situation.
I mean, listen, I couldn't agree with you more. The way you put it, the perspective that you're sharing with us, it makes all the sense in the world. And now that we've gotten the nonsense, right? All the stuff, there we go. We've gotten the 5 minutes of fame over the negative stuff. Let's talk about the positive of what this New York Jets team has looked like in OTAs and, of course, going into minicamp, starting with the very own Aaron Rodgers, who many have said has looked like a general right now operating the offense. What have you noticed about Aaron Rodgers? Like, what are you excited about in regards to how he's tackling and taking on this new year with this roster?
I think he looks very comfortable. And it's a very good thing because, OTAs, mandatory minicamp, you're not in pads. You're not allowed to be in pads. And that's the next major step, a little bit down the road, obviously, that I'm keeping an eye on. How does it look right off the bat when you're in pads, when it is that full speed tempo and Rodgers is commanding the offense? But he's hitting all his targets. He's going through his progressions. You see the highlight tape plays of the no-look passes to Garrett Wilson and Jeremy Ruckert. He's very in control and feels like he's picking up right where he left off. And I think if you're a Jets fan, seeing Rodgers only play 4 snaps, there was probably that inherent fear in the back of your head where, you don't know if he's going to be able to bounce right back and be able to lead this offense to where it looked like he was going to lead it last season. And obviously, we have to see what that looks like at full speed, but he's connected with Garrett Wilson all the time this offseason. He's constantly working on building that rapport to the level of what it was like when he was playing with Devontae Adams. He's working in, Xavier Gibson. He's working in different players. He's targeting the running backs, which I'm sure we'll get to later, whether it be Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis. He's getting the ball out quickly to the point where even in the scenarios, even in the plays where he's pressured, you're not noticing it as much because a veteran, talented quarterback is able to get the ball out quick. There's a lot of positives here, and there's a lot of really good things happening. And I think it's going to be exciting to see, hey, we already have this baseline. We already saw what he can do in OTAs, in the beginning part of the offseason. How is this going to look with even more experience in training camp? And I think that's the exciting part because, look, even if Aaron Rodgers is 70%, 80% of himself,
thank you,
the best quarterback the Jets have had in years. It's just so different seeing a quarterback of Aaron Rodgers' caliber operating the offense, even in shorts and a t-shirt. And that's, I think, what people should take away from this. Look at what Darnold looked like. Look at what Zach Wilson looked like. Look at what all these backup type quarterbacks have looked like. Things don't look easy. They look like pretty difficult. With Rodgers, the easy stuff is easy. It's smooth. It flows. And it's so noticeable when you move from one type of quarterback play to the next. And I think that's going to be something that Jets fans come to appreciate this year.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of individuals, you said it beautifully, right? That if Aaron Rodgers is even 70% of what he can be, that's a plus, right? So before I say my piece, in regards to his age 40 season or the Achilles injury, him bouncing back from that, do you have any concerns about those two aspects of his game, his age and, of course, coming back from the injury?
I think there has to be a level of concern, right? He's a 40-year-old playing in a league where there's basically car crash type collisions on every single play. But at the same time, you'd be worried about that with him in general, even if there wasn't an Achilles injury at 40 years old. I think you're not going to have a good answer whether you're going to feel good, whether you're going to feel bad until you actually see him on the field. Because it's so easy to be just overly positive watching things happen in practice. There's a different switch when you get on the field. There's a different switch, whether, and I think so many people can relate to this, whether in a competitive sport or a test where you're timed, when you add that element of competition and pressure into the equation, you see how far along that person actually is. You see where that person can actually thrive or not thrive. And at the end of the day, I would be very confident that Rodgers would tell you the same thing. I'm sure he's very confident that he's going to bounce back, but you're not going to know for sure until he actually steps on that field.
Yeah, I look at it this way, man. It's the whole concept of being in the military, right? Like we train. And of course, whenever you got freaking blanks freaking firing overhead and the danger's not necessarily so real, like sometimes you can get a little lax. But you really know what you're about when, the rounds are really flying and things get really heated when you're actually in an engagement. So I'm personally amongst the belief that I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be a more than serviceable quarterback. I think he's going to potentially finish as one of the top 10. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think he's going to be an MVP Aaron Rodgers. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's going to be a top 5 quarterback. Can he do it? I believe he can. But I believe Aaron Rodgers, at worst, at his floor, is being a top 10 quarterback in this league. And if that's the case, I believe with the top 5 defense and the top 5 special teams, his team can do some special things. And I still believe a top 10 Aaron Rodgers is going to break a bunch of New York Jets records at the quarterback position because, like you said, we haven't had a caliber of a quarterback like him ever. Not in my lifetime, not in your. Like, we just haven't seen it. Like Joe Namath is the GOAT to all of us, right? But even Joe Namath is not on the caliber of quarterback like an Aaron Rodgers. So I'm excited to go ahead and see Aaron Rodgers. But you brought up a very important component, right? Him being out there, him commanding the offense. And we're seeing a very special individual, Garrett Wilson, a.k.a. the Beast. This kid, I believe, is going to be a superstar in this league. He's already being put into conversations with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson in terms of what he's been able to achieve within his first 2 years in the league. Except he's been able to achieve what he's done with 6 different starting quarterbacks, while those guys were able to do it with 1 or 2. Like, you're hearing a lot of the positives about what Garrett Wilson can be. What do you think Garrett Wilson can achieve with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback?
I mean, I hate to sound cliche, right? But I think the sky's the limit. Wilson is the type of player where he can break off any type of cornerback, he can run any type of route, and be successful with it. He's just a pure route running savant. He's talented in getting in and out of his breaks, setting up cornerbacks to be exactly where he wants to be so he can break off a route and get open. It just comes down to a guy that can get him the ball. And I think by seeing the early repetitions of Rodgers with Wilson, when you have that mind meld, look at how, for example, Davante Adams and Rodgers were. Anytime Davante was coming in and out of a break, Rodgers would know exactly what he was doing and get the ball to him. Anytime there was a back shoulder opportunity, Rodgers would nail him. And I think you could see that with Wilson and Rodgers this season. But I think Wilson has even more route running ability than Davante did, right? Where Davante had a little bit more size and was a fantastic route runner. But I don't know if he had the wiggle and just the pure agility, it feels like, that Wilson had.
The athleticism. The athleticism
Exactly.
is definitely different. Yep.
So I'm very excited to see how that plays out. I think if all things break right, double-digit touchdowns, especially with those two working together in the red zone, I think is a very real possibility. And I think yardage-wise, you're looking at anywhere from 1,200 to approaching 1,400 yards. I think you're in for a really big season if these two can stay on the field and stay healthy. And that's really the overall theme of this entire offense, right? If Tyron Smith stays healthy, if Mike Williams stays healthy, if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy. And the thing that sucks is you can't predict any of that. You can't be like, well, this guy's going to get hurt, so all this is going to happen. You have to approach it where you think everyone's going to stay primarily healthy for the majority of the season. And I think if that happens, you're going to see the official, and I say official because people who actually are watching the games on a week-to-week basis know that Garrett Wilson's a star, that he's one of the better wide receivers in this league. If everything breaks right, everybody is going to know that Garrett Wilson is an upper echelon wide receiver.
Man, listen, I love what the ceiling is for Garrett Wilson. I really think this kid is going to light it up this year. And I think the engagement that we have back and forth with a lot of individuals who just clown on the Jets or who really just don't know what the skill positions really look like because we haven't had a quarterback actually be able to elevate our guys. I think that's what makes it so crazy is that our quarterback play has been bottom tier in the NFL for the last couple of years. And even as such, you've seen guys like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall just defy the odds and still produce. When Breece is facing stack boxes, when Garrett Wilson is facing double teams and the most inaccurate passes of all time being thrown his way. I really think by the end of this season, again, like you just said, everything pans out, everybody stays on the field. You could see a guy like a Garrett Wilson getting some offensive player of the year type freaking accolades. I can see him being in that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up a great point in terms of previous year's quarterback play. So much of the NFL and really any high-level sport, it's just a game of margins. It's a game of inches. There's plays last year where if Aaron Rodgers is on the field, Garrett Wilson's breaking off 70-yard touchdowns. He's converting giant first downs.
Yep.
But because you don't have a quarterback that can hit the types of windows that Garrett Wilson can open for great quarterbacks, those plays weren't converted. With Aaron Rodgers on the field, he is going to be able to hit those windows. He's going to be able to get the ball to Wilson where most other quarterbacks in the league wouldn't be able to. And on the other hand, Wilson's going to afford Rodgers the ability to throw passes that he wouldn't be able to throw to the majority of wide receivers in the league. It's that sort of symbiosis, that type of relationship where those two can help elevate each other.
Ah, man, listen, we're talking about Brees, we're talking about Garrett Wilson, but a lot of people also kind of felt some type of way about the decision we made this year, right, in the draft. So I'm going to ask the question straight out. Like, when it comes to the tight ends, which our tight end room, I think, is very, very underrated. But before we even get into that, were you Bowers at 10 guy? I don't want to go ahead and offend if you were.
It's a tough one for me, right? Because
Okay.
I would have been thrilled with Bowers at 10 because I think he would have been a fun asset for the Jets to use on offense.
Okay, fair enough.
But for me, my favorite pick would have been a Malik Neighbors, a Rome Odunze, where you're getting that long-term running mate for Garrett Wilson on the outside and just leveling up the weapons that the Jets have, where now you would have gone from, okay, it's Garrett, it's Mike Williams, and then it's it ended up being Malachi Corey. But at that point, it was like a Xavier Gibson in the slot too. Right. Oh, we got Garrett Wilson, Rome Odunze, and Mike Williams on top. That I felt like if you were going the offensive playmaker was the best move, but I was still thinking, hey, Bowers would be a great pick. Now that we're, I'd say, a month, 2 months removed from the draft, the way the Jets approach it was probably the best option because Tyron Smith, fantastic offensive tackle, one of the best left tackles in the league. But he's one of the best offensive tackles in the league when he's healthy. And that's been his major issue. And you also have a player in Morgan Moses who solid, really good right tackle, but he started to have some of the health issues on top of Elijah Vera Tucker. And when you look at it like that, I don't think the Jets were ever going to pass up on the offensive lineman unless it was a Odunze, because they probably saw it as, hey, we never want to have another situation like we had last year where we are literally scraping the bottom of the barrel for offensive line starters, not backups, starters. So
that was rough.
I think it ended up being the smart move. I think Olu Fashanu learning from a guy like Tyron Smith is going to be really cool. And I think it's going to pay huge dividends. And hey, you still got a really great receiver, in my opinion, in Malachi Corley. So It was kind of the best of both worlds for where the Jets were positioned in that draft.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit, for me, I was originally wholeheartedly team offensive line. I love the Tyron Smith acquisition. It's my favorite acquisition in the offseason. I really believe our offseason right now, the A-plus factor is bringing in a Tyron Smith and what he can go ahead and do in protecting the blind side of Aaron Rodgers, who is the most important individual on the field. But you're right. When the guy is on the field, dog, he's one of the best to ever do it. But he can't stay on the field consistently. Now, something in my head keeps telling me this is going to be the year where he finds a full season of health and he makes it from day one all the way through the playoffs. I'm getting this vibe, and I'm going to go ahead and put that to the ether so that becomes the reality. But I believe no matter what, Olu Fashanu or the best offensive tackle available was definitely going to be a need. And Olu was one of my favorite guys in this draft. I'm not going to lie to you. I was very excited to see him there and available, and they go that route. But I did slowly become Team Neighbors and Team Adunze as I watched more tape and thought about the excitement level of having that guy next to Garrett Wilson. So I'm on board with that. If they were going to do it and they did go, we're going to go the freaking wide receiver route, fine. Then we would all have to pray for health when it comes to our O-line. But I really love the idea of bringing in Adunze and Neighbors. Ultimately, they couldn't trade up to get Adunze. We heard that they were trying to do so, didn't budge. Was it the Falcons or idiots? Or
it was the Falcons.
The Falcons. Yeah, because freaking idiots.
They decided to take Michael Penix, and it's screwed everything up.
Who would have been there for them at pick 10 plus extra assets? But you can't help morons. You know what I'm saying? So they did what they did. But ultimately, I think in terms of the route of going Olufashanu, you add that extra layer of security. Because do we believe Tyron Smith's going to last an entire season? I don't think anybody does. But we're hopeful. We hope this is the year he does it. But as you also stated, Morgan Moses battling some injuries as well. Although he is an Iron Man and played through a torn pec, which is just, I don't know how that man did that to me. And he played well with one arm in the NFL last year. So that was very telling. But having Olu back there again, you'll have a guy who's learning from the likes of a Tyron Smith who could potentially have to fill in sometime this year. You feel much better about that than the likes of the Billy Turners of the world, or maybe Carter Warren having to come in right away. So I'm with it, man. So, but the tight end room, right? Going back to that, how do you feel about our tight end room since we didn't add a guy like Brock Bowers to it?
I find the tight end room fascinating because obviously Tyler Conklin, he's the top dog there. I think he's an underrated pick to have a really good season. Rodgers has been kind of hit or miss when it comes to tight ends. Some tight ends he'll value a lot. Some tight ends he won't. I think it all depends on, quite frankly, week to week. I think some weeks you're going to have giant Garrett Wilson weeks, giant Breece Hall weeks, and I think there's going to be a few, probably 3 to 4 weeks this year where all of a sudden you're looking up and Tyler Conklin has 6 receptions and a touchdown, or he's catching 2 touchdowns in the red zone, and it's like, oh, I guess this is the week where Rodgers is featuring the tight end. Beyond him, I'm really interested to see how the team utilizes the likes of Jeremy Ruckert and Kenny Yeboah, because I think Ruckert could be kind of a Brock Bowers light, or the dollar store version of Brock Bowers, in the sense of maybe not the jet sweeps, maybe not the athleticism, but I feel like he's the type of player where you could line him up as a fullback on a play and as an H-back on a different play, and really utilize a skill set that he showed at Ohio State, but wasn't fully utilized there, and he's shown in the NFL as well. So I think he's a fun chess piece that, hey, who knows if Nathaniel Hackett's going to take full advantage of that? I'm not confident, but it'd be really cool if he does. And then you have Kenny Yeboah, who Rodgers has hit more than a few times already and has been making an impact in the passing game. So does he have a role as maybe the pseudo Tyler Conklin backup, and Ruckert has his own little role as the H-back / tight end hybrid? Who knows? I just think it's a very interesting position, similar to running back, in how does it shape up? How does the depth chart and the snap shape up? And what does it look like when a Hall of Fame quarterback is able to deploy all these different types of weapons? Because I think that's really what it comes down to. How does Rodgers want to use all these different types of players? Because, giving a Hall of Fame mind and quarterback the ability to use all different weapons to attack different types of defenses, it's going to be pretty cool to see that play out.
Yeah, so I for one, am a big believer in Tyler Conklin, and I do believe he's one of the most underrated tight ends in all of football. This is a guy who's finished with 600 plus yards in back-to-back seasons with, again, we're talking about subpar quarterback play. A lot of individuals don't realize it, but he was one of the highest rated contested catch tight ends in the NFL the last couple of years too. So he's up there in that echelon. He's another, like you said, another weapon for Rodgers to utilize that a lot of people are sleeping on, which I think is going to be a sneaky weapon for him, because when you're focused on Garrett Wilson and you're focused on Mike Williams and you're focused on Breece Hall, boom, that's when a guy like a freaking Tyler Conklin can start to eat, and he could change the dynamic of an entire game because he's being disrespected. Personally, I'm hoping to see the tight end space be utilized more. I'm a big fan of Jeremy Ruckert as well. I think this is going into year 3. We need to go ahead and see that next evolution of his game. This is a guy who we've liked a lot in blocking, but we really haven't really seen him explode in terms of his ability to catch the ball. But like you were saying before, in Ohio, we know he could do it. So I want to go ahead and see him get utilized as well. But speaking of weapons, we talked about, you brought up running back as well as being another option that Aaron Rodgers has at his disposal. How do you feel about this freaking running back room?
I mean, Breece Hall hasn't practiced much this offseason. And personally, once again, not something I'm worrying about. It is very early in the offseason. There is no need at all to push Hall. He's your superstar. He's going to get plenty of carries during the year. Why try to run any part of him into the dirt in June? It just makes no sense. If there's any little thing bothering him right now, Jets shouldn't push it. They're doing the right thing.
Yep.
Braylon Allen's probably been my favorite player to watch this offseason because I knew what he was as a runner, right? Who could forget the 17-year-old freshman at Wisconsin just barreling over people and really never slowing down in his college career in that aspect of his game. But I didn't realize he had this type of ability as a receiver. You saw the report that he made a contested catch. He shows soft hands. He shows good route running.
Yep.
This is the type of running back where, as the Jets are shifting towards a more power style, downhill style, as you could see evidence through some of their moves and the addition of a guy like Braylon Allen, he's going to fit that backup running back mold perfectly, in my opinion. Because now, when Breece Hall needs a spell, you have a guy that, number one, can still attack the whole downhill, and we obviously have to see confirmation in pads, in training camp, to really solidify that point, but it looks really good so far. And then number two, and I think this is the most important aspect, your backup running back now, you're not losing anything in the passing game. You have a guy that can still make plays out of the backfield. You have a guy that can decleat people in pass pro. So now, whether it's Breece or Braylon on the field, your offense can keep churning along. And that's not even to mention Isaiah Davis, who himself has shown great burst and pretty good hands. So if you have 3 running backs that can really just keep things moving, and once again, big caveat, we need to see what it looks like in training camp, OTAs. There's no pads, the blocking's different, etc., etc. But if you have 3 guys that are serviceable at worst and really productive at best, that's a really good start for an offense, and that's a really good stable of running backs. And then that brings you to, the Tariq Cohens of the world, who he's shown his flashes out of the backfield, and Xavier Valade, who has got his work in with Rodgers at times. Izzy Abanikanda, on the other hand, just keeps falling down the depth chart, and it sucks for a guy that was drafted only last year, but he's not showing that same vision or burst that the other guys have shown. And, those mistakes are still there. That hesitancy is still there. I've been consistent in saying that the running back room is my number one position to watch. Obviously, tight ends up there too now, but just seeing how Allen and Davis develop and seeing if Izzy can scratch and claw his way onto the roster, and even seeing if a guy like Tariq Cohen, who has just an insanely inspirational story, mind you, can make this roster. There's just so much that not only is going to impact the team itself in terms of roster construction, but it's also going to give you some insight into how this team wants to run the football and run its offense. I'm really excited to see how these guys keep doing, because by all accounts, the likes of Allen and Davis keep impressing every day.
Now, before I get into my take on the running backs, I see Barney freaking out over here about Aaron Rodgers not making it and about the Barney. Yeah, he did do the physical yesterday. I think actually everybody did the physical yesterday. They wanted to do the physical yesterday along with the media day. So today they kind of jumped right into class time and, of course, getting on the field. Aaron Rodgers killed the freaking physical. There was no issues. Mike Williams, physical came back showing that he's on track to be available for some reps during training camp. And same with Elijah Vera Tucker. So, relax, man. Stay off the ledge. I saw you say talk you off the ledge. This is us talking you off. Aaron Rodgers is good. He already passed his physical when it came to the physical. But yeah, the running back room. Oh, my bad. Were you going to say something about that?
Yeah, I will say this. Considering how much was said about Rodgers missing because of an event, do you think that news would have been kept internal if there was a serious issue with Aaron Rodgers' his physical? Just like objectively. The minute that news would have got out, would have been spreading like a wildfire.
That's facts. That's facts. But yeah, the running back room, I love it. I love it. And I'm with you 100%. I think the whole Breece Hall is banged up thing. I've seen a lot of individuals are freaking out because they haven't had any kind of official verbiage as to what the issue is. I don't care if the kid stubbed his toe. I don't care if Breece Hall stubbed his toe. You sit his ass down and you let that man freaking rest, because I think he is going to honestly be the player that wins Offensive Player of the Year. I think Breece Hall's ability to contribute to this offense with a legitimate offensive line, with a legitimate threat at quarterback. You can't – the last 2 years, the kid has faced the most stacked boxes of any running back in the NFL, without question. And in that time frame, he still leads the league with more 50-yard runs or more than any other running back in the freaking league. If that doesn't tell you the elite level of play he brings to the table, I don't know what can. And I have Breece Hall potentially being Offensive Player of the Year. So if he sneezes and needs to sit down, you sit his ass down. I'm with you 100%. And I think it's a great opportunity for these younger guys to kind of go ahead and get some valuable reps in. Braylon Allen has been impressive. I'm with you. I was tracking this guy's bruising ability to go ahead and run. He's also a deceptively fast guy for his size. I really was kind of surprised as I watched more tape on him on just how quick and elusive he is for a big guy. I never in a million years thought he could run routes and catch the way he's been doing right now in OTAs. To be a hands catcher at that, for a running back his size, goes to show you just how incredible of an athlete he is. And that's a weapon that I don't even think the Jets knew they were getting, because it sounded like almost they were shocked at his ability to go ahead and catch the ball. Apparently him making that sideline catch in practice kind of like set the offense in like a wild like shock, and they were applauding. So that goes to tell you, like, even they weren't expecting him to kind of have that level of ability. And I get it. It's just in freaking shorts and a t-shirt, but that's a big dude. That is a big dude being able to showcase that he has that ability, you know what I'm saying, in shorts and a t-shirt, to me says a lot. I really think Braylon Allen is going to be more of a compliment to Breece Hall than we originally imagined. Now, like you said, there's no wondering if he gets out on the field, it's not just going to automatically be he's running the ball. He can catch the ball too, just like a Breece Hall. Isaiah Davis apparently had to learn a quick lesson from Aaron Rodgers, right? Apparently he went out on a play and he was sent away because he lined up wrong. Were you tracking that? Are you aware of what happened with that?
I did not see that, but he's evidently has bounced back, because he's getting plenty of work in with Rodgers from what it seems like.
Yeah, I just look at the running back room, and Izzy, I think, potentially might be the odd man out, because apparently Tariq Cohen is, of course, now showing up. Again, love his inspirational story. It's been, 4 years since he's played in the NFL? So for him to even come in.
It's been 4 years.
Been a while, right? And he still has the burst, and they're talking about how he's still very elusive and has the burst in practice. I'm like, well, Izzy, I like the Izzy pick. I was really excited about the kid, but it seems like he's just been struggling since last year, and then now going into this year, they felt they needed to bring some competition for him. Do you see a scenario where Izzy potentially could be off the roster if things keep going the way they're going?
I think it really depends, right? Because what's his role? With Breece and Braylon Allen showing what he's shown, and Isaiah Davis showing what he's shown.
Yeah.
Are the Jets going to keep a fourth running back? If it's a fourth running back, Has Izzy shown enough, or is he going to show enough that he can beat out a guy like Tariq Cohen? And then you move on to a different aspect of the roster, returns. Izzy has shown in college that he can be a legit return man. But is he going to beat out Xavier Gibson? Is he going to beat out Jakeem Grant? Is he going to beat out Tariq Cohen? You're looking at a player, and I understand where people are going to say, oh, but he was drafted last year. People, and myself included, have knocked Joe Douglas for not moving on from guys quick enough.
Yep.
You want to have the best possible roster. If Izzy can't beat out the running backs and he can't beat out the return men, flip him for a late round pick or basically tell him good luck at your next spot. And I'm rooting for him. I really liked his talent coming out. He had some of the best breakaway speed in last year's draft class. But at the end of the day, if his vision isn't up to par compared to the other running backs, and his catching isn't up to par to the other running backs, and his return ability isn't better than the guys he's competing against, there's no need to keep him on the roster because you have guys at every spot that are simply better at the moment. So it's one of those things where unless he does a complete 180 and just blows people away in training camp and is legitimately the best returner on the team and looks electric with the ball in his hands and pads, you're probably looking at a situation where he isn't on the team this season simply by virtue of what other guys are showing, not necessarily what he isn't showing.
Yeah, and I agree with you, man. I was one of the individuals at first arguing that, you know what, I don't think Joe D would cut him. He's a Joe D guy. Joe D hasn't quit on anybody that he's drafted. I think Kuntz is the only guy, if I'm not mistaken, that he drafted, also cut, but got Kuntz back, of course, on the practice squad. So that was my argument. But then I look at it this year, and you're looking how much they invested into the running back room, and then you start bringing in a guy like Tariq Cohen in to go ahead and compete as well. They're obviously seeing something, and there's going to be a need for potentially that fourth guy. They carried 4 running backs last year, so it looks like they want to have a fourth guy potentially on the roster, and they're bringing in competition for Izzy. It only means to me that Izzy's not performing the part, and I think they're considering it. You have to be. If Jody's doing all this extra stuff for bringing people in here to compete, he also had a couple of new individuals invited for workouts today during mini camp. So, I think 2 of them were running backs. So, obviously, there's some concerns there. But I could see a situation where Izzy is the odd man out. And honestly, I can honestly say the team might be better for it. And I'm all about putting the best guys on the field that's going to contribute. And this is a problem as a Jets fan, we're not accustomed to having, right? What he's a third, was it a 3rd round pick? I believe it was. Izzy was a 3rd round pick.
I think it was a 5th. I think it was a 5th round pick.
There was a time where there's no way we're getting rid of a 5th round pick. As a Jets fan, we need to play all of our draft picks. We can't afford to go ahead and let them go. But in this situation, I can see it making a lot more sense that they just move on. So, man, Izzy potentially being the odd man out. So the running back room, I feel pretty good about it. It sounds like you feel pretty good about it. One of the weaknesses that you've heard a lot of individuals talk about, right, throughout the offseason was the New York Jets safety room, right? You still got Simmons out there. I don't know why he's still available. Diggs is still out there. And people have been screaming hey, go get one of these guys to real solidify the safety room. But Chuck Clark had a press conference the other day. He came out and he talked. They were asking questions, and he talked about how he's actually pissed. He's pissed how the Baltimore Ravens kind of dismissed him, how they ended it. He's pissed that he got hurt last year and couldn't pretty much shove it back into their faces for letting him go. And he seems focused, he seems angry, and he seems determined to go ahead and prove that he's got more than enough left in the tank and that the Ravens made a mistake. One thing I love about freaking competitors and athletes is you can find anything to motivate you, but a chip on your shoulder can take you a long way. Chuck Clark is healthy. He's in that safety room alongside of Ashton Davis and Tony Adams. How do you feel about our safety room as a whole, specifically Chuck Clark? What did he bring to the table?
I'm a big fan of Chuck Clark. I think that he is someone that when you saw a guy like Jordan Whitehead play last year and occasionally Tony Adams, they weren't sure tacklers. Chuck Clark is a sure, consistent tackler, and that is something that the Jets have not had at that position in a very in a decent amount of time. I don't know if it's a very long time, but a decent amount of time. Considering what you have at cornerback and considering what you have at linebacker, having a guy that's pretty good in coverage and a very sure tackler is a very, very important thing for this type of defense. Having a guy that can come into the box and make a tackle working down from the far part of the secondary is a very important aspect. But in terms of the overall safety room, I think Chuck Clark is going to be one of the main starters. I wouldn't say it's a complete lock, but I'd probably go with 75% confidence as of right now, approaching 80. I'm really interested to see how Tony Adams and I think even Ashton Davis to an extent and Jalen Key and the rest of that room looks, because this Jets organization has always made that type of bigger signing in training camp. It's usually been offensive line because the team's dealing with a sporadic injury or they've realized they need to fill a hole at that position. This year, I think if that move is made, it's going to be at safety, because I think the Jets are going to look at the early portion of training camp and be like, all right, how do we feel about Tony Adams? How do we feel about Clark? How do we feel about Davis, Key, et cetera, et cetera? And if they don't feel confident, they're going to go out and try to sign someone. If they do feel confident, they're going to roll with their guys. It's just one of those positions, once again, where how much can you really get a read at safety during OTAs? How much can you really get a read at a position that involves a lot of tackling and being that last line of defense,
right,
in shorts and t-shirts? So it's something that, similar to the Reddick situation we discussed, similar to how the running backs are going to look and what that position group really shapes up to be, you're not going to have that full, clear picture until the pads are on, because that's a really big part of the position.
Yeah, man. And I think people forget how sure of a tackler Chuck Clark was for the Baltimore
One of the best.
One of the best in the league. He has one of the lowest missed tackle rates. Again, I think they only let him go because they wind up drafting Hamilton. Hamilton? Yeah,
Kyle Hamilton.
Kyle Hamilton. And you know what? It's like you said, it's a safety position. You know what I'm saying? How many of those guys are you going to really carry in the safety room? So they made a football decision, but it wasn't because the guy couldn't ball. You know, they had Hamilton identified as potentially a generational talent at that position. They had a chance to get him. They got him, so he was available. So I think Chuck Clark, man, is going to come out lights out. I think, again, that chip on his shoulder is going to add motivation. And you said it perfectly. You really can't tell what these guys are capable of until they can start hitting people, because that's what they're there for. They're there to go ahead and blow up the plays that get past the secondary. They're the last line of defense. So we really don't know what we have until they start hitting. Would you be opposed, or would you be in like excited about bringing in a guy like Simmons or a guy like Diggs? And why do you think they're even still available? Because both of those guys still have some quality football left in them, and they were no jokes, you know what I'm saying, just last year.
I think it also goes to the point of where the Jets are at. I think a lot of other teams are looking at that in the same way, where they know they can't get a great read on certain positions until training camp starts, until the pads are on, you're hitting, and you actually see how those guys respond. And I don't think it's going to be uncommon where you have veterans that know they're going to be in shape, they know they're going to be ready to play, and they know that they're going to be best suited for a contender to basically choose a spot and go like, hey, this team needs a safety, or I think this team needs a safety, I'm going to go here. Or, hey, a guy went down with an injury in training camp, there's a spot available for me to slide right into, I'm going to go here. I think it's a balance between the two sides of a lot of teams don't know if they have a hole at the position and are kind of waiting to see, hey, what does this room look like when we're actually doing things that matter to the position? And I think the other side of it is these veterans being like, I don't need to participate in OTAs. I don't need to participate in mandatory minicamp. Once training camp gets here, I'm going to pick the best spot for me and go from there. And then when it comes to the Jets, I think they would benefit a lot from a guy like Justin Simmons, but, depends on price point, depends how much he's asking for. It depends what the other position, what the other guys at the position look like. Because, if Tony Adams is showing out in training camp and Chuck Clark looks solid, do you need to spend that money on Justin Simmons? Probably not. If Tony Adams looks lost and, Chuck Clark is still working his way back, much different conversation.
Good point. So talking about the secondary, one of the guys I've been kind of like popping a little bit, like you said, in OTAs is Stiggers. The kid from Canada that we drafted. Again, the majority of us who've watched tape or are trying to get a better understanding of how to properly analyze the skill sets in the league was thrown for a loophole in that one, because the Canadian Football League is vastly different. But one thing I liked about it is that a lot of what those guys can do happen to evolve with a lot of motion on offense and defense being able to keep up with that. And again, the guy won defensive rookie of the year. And he's been making some plays in OTAs. I mean, he's been turning some heads. Somebody mentioned Eccles, seeing Eccles play some more snaps this year. I'm assuming it's because of the DJ Reed MC2 conversation, trying to figure out who's going to get paid. Is there a chance that you see a guy like Stiggers potentially making it a little bit easier for the Jets to let a guy like DJ Reed walk?
Absolutely. I mean, if he continues to play the way he's playing into training camp, into the preseason, you might have your plug-and-play guy alongside Sauce Gardner in 2025. And I'm a proponent of paying Michael Carter II more so than DJ Reed, because
100%.
You look at the age, Reed's approaching 30. He's an undersized outside corner, phenomenal outside corner, mind you, but there is probably a much lower drop-off in the sense of when it's gone for him, versus Carter's one of the best players at a position that is only getting more important year after year in slot corner as more and more talented wide receivers come into the league. I think it should be a priority for the Jets to lock him up. That's a completely different conversation for a different day. But whether it is Eccles, whether it is a guy like Stiggers emerging, if you have guys on the outside that you could just possibly plug in and have a defensive staff that has a history of developing players, whether it be elevating Sauce Gardner to that level, elevating DJ Reed to that level, elevating Quincy Williams to an even higher level, having that baseline of a player in Stiggers who then could be developed even further by this defensive staff, if they're still here, mind you.
Right.
I think it's very feasible. I think it's very, very, very feasible that the Jets look at it and are like, hey, we drafted this guy to be just the running mate for Gardner for the next X amount of years and be on a cheap contract while we have to pay Sauce top dollar.
Yeah.
So and then we have to pay Michael Carter II top dollar for his position. I think it's very feasible. And then also you could look at it as the Jets target a slot corner in the draft or target another corner in the draft and go that route. But we are so far away from that. We are not going to dive into that because once again, we're still in OTAs and minicamp. Training camp hasn't even started. But to circle back to where it started before I go off on a complete tangent, yes, I think Stiggers can be that cornerback too in 2025.
I love to hear that. You know what I'm saying? Just speaking on Stiggers, one of the individuals he's been clamping up in OTAs is Alan freaking Lazard. Alan Lazard has been getting clamped up by Stiggers, making him look less than wide receiver that was paid freaking $11 million a year to go ahead and come play for an NFL team. Again, it speaks volumes, I think, to the level of play Stickers is bringing to the table. But it also kind of adds another layer of the just the annoyance of freaking Alan Lazard. At this point, I think he's agitated more of the fan base than any other player on this roster. Alan freaking Lazard, man. Do you see a scenario in which Malachi Corley, Brownlee, or Gibson are ahead of him, or all of them are ahead of him in the depth chart, and he just winds up being the guy that he comes in on rushing plays to go ahead and be a blocker? Like, what do you see Alan Lazard's role being on this team?
I think I said this a few weeks ago, and I'll stand by this in the sense of Lazard's best role is being a situational role type player. This is not a guy that you want getting consistent starter snaps. You want your Garrett Wilson out there. You want your Mike Williams out there. You want Malachi Corley out there. The way they've been using Xavier Gibson this offseason, I'd say you want him out there ahead of Lazard. Brownlee, with the flashes he's shown, even him. So that point, I think they could jump him. But with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback and with the rapport that those two have shown, Lazard has had some highs in this offseason program. There's been some lows, and those lows have been pretty bad. But I think it would be in the Jets' best interest to basically mitigate all the negatives that Lazard could bring to the table. Play him the least amount of snaps possible, but bring him in for situations that you think he'd thrive in. A 3rd and short where he's using his bigger frame and Rodgers can get him a ball in traffic, which, to his credit, he's shown that he can come down with those balls still in the offseason program. Whether it's at the goal line where he can use his bigger frame as maybe a big slot to overpower a slot corner and convert the chains or convert a touchdown. Lazard has that propensity to make more errors and more mistakes the longer he's on the field. But if he's in that role type of spot where he's getting a few snaps a game in high leverage spots and Rodgers trusts him as a target in those spots, I think you could see a little bit of success from him. But by no means should Lazard be getting starter reps on the outside or in the slot or any wide receiver position on the field.
Yeah, man, at this point, I know he has to be on the roster, right? Because we've already heard it from Saleh saying, like, listen, he's here at least till next year. Almost as if he's already letting us know he won't be on the team after his guarantees are off the books. I was really hoping that, the Alan Lazard and Aaron Rodgers connection would be a benefit, right? It would be something that can go ahead and just add value to this team. And we didn't get to see it last year. Granted, seeing a professional football player who gets paid to do this, a lot of money to play a game, not take it as seriously as he did last year, to be a contributor, to be of some assistance to one of the worst quarterback rooms there is in football. Like, as a veteran of the game who knows what winning looks like, I really was expecting more out of him. And I think because of that, I lost a little bit of respect and patience for him. But I'm with you, man. At this point, I put him in situational as a situational guy. I know it's $11 million. I get it. But at this point, I don't think he's one of the top 4 best wide receivers on this roster. I'm starting to question whether or not he's better than Brownlee. I think ultimately you bring him in, when needed, right? The change of pace kind of guy, or as a blocker, so to speak. So Alan Lazard for me, man, has been kind of disappointing. But this is what it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's on the roster. He's going to be here next year. Maybe Aaron Rodgers makes him, straighten out. Like, your uncle telling him to go ahead and act right, and he acts right. Who knows? But ultimately, Alan Lazard to me, I'm already anxious and can't wait for him to be off this roster. But that's a year from now before we have to worry about it. So with that said, man, who's the New York Jets you're most excited to see this year and why?
It's a tough one. The easy answer for me would be Garrett Wilson. Seeing a full season with him and Aaron Rodgers, I think is just going to be electric, very fun to watch. Put whatever positive adjective you want in that sentence, I think would apply. I think a very underrated one for me is going to be either Jermaine Johnson or Quincy Williams. Very easy to pick someone on the offense side of the ball, whether it be Rodgers, who I think is going to have a really good year, or Breece Hall, who I think has an outside shot to challenge for 2,000 all-purpose yards, or Garrett Wilson, or et cetera, et cetera. But I think if you look at the defense, right, Jermaine Johnson entering year 3, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, year 3. I think he could take another step forward, up that run defense even more, and hit double-digit sacks, and be that opposite force as a pass rusher, more so in the power aspect, while you have Reddick on the other side, to really cause havoc for opposing quarterbacks. I think you could have that leap, which that would make contract extension talks even more fun for the Jets, because then you'd have a top pass rusher, cornerback, and wide receiver that would all need to be paid. But hey, that's problems that good teams have. It'd be very cool for the Jets to have that. I think I'm very excited for Jermaine to work opposite of Reddick. And then when it comes to Quincy, I'm excited to see what he can do with that really breakout season under his belt. Does he take another step forward? Can he be even better in coverage, even better in all the aspects of football that he improved at? And I think if he does, now you're taking even more off the shoulders of CJ Mosley and letting him just be the veteran communicator that he is amazing at, and not have to, clean up the mistakes that Quincy would still make at times, right? Because as talented and incredible of a season that Quincy had, there's still the boneheaded play here and there where he's just flying upfield too far, and all of a sudden now the running back has a great cutback lane and Mosley has to clean it up. If you have Quincy clean up those mistakes and basically keep that same level of play, but bring that mental side of the game even further, I think you could see the Jets defense, if not hit the same level it was last year, be even better.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, for me, I think I'm excited to go ahead and see, of course, Breece Hall and see Garrett Wilson. Actually, I'm really pumped to see what Jermaine Johnson does if he takes it to another level again this year. But I think like that as a whole, collectively, we're all expecting these guys to hit a different tier, right, of play. For me, the guy that I'm most excited to go ahead and see, and maybe it's just because I want the people who doubted him to kind of like, just kind of, eat it, is Conklin. I want to see Tyler Conklin with a legitimate quarterback getting him the ball. Can he get into that top 5 conversation of tight ends in the NFL? Because that's some pretty rare air of individuals, right? There's some young tight ends in the league right now who are doing some really impressive things. A couple of old guys, and Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, who's done some great things. Darren Waller just retired, so it's opening up another tier in that higher echelon level. I want to see Tyler Conklin feast. I don't know why. I'm so invested in him just breaking records at the tight end position for the New York Jets, but I do believe he's going to be a weapon that gets underrated, like I was saying earlier, by a lot of defenses, and it's going to provide Aaron Rodgers with some easy freaking passes, and he's going to go ahead and get some yak too. Last year, I think he had 228 yak yards out of 630, almost 39% of his yardage was yak yards. So this is a guy who also made it a point to talk about getting better in his yak game this offseason. So I'm really pumped to see Tyler Conklin. And again, maybe it's because I was so adamant that we didn't need a tight end, and I went to battle with the Bowers boys over Tyler Conklin. Maybe that's why. But I really want to go ahead and see what he's capable of legitimately with a quarterback, with a real quarterback. And I think Aaron Rodgers, like you said, historically has never been known to be a guy who really maximizes the tight end position. But I think this could be the year where he sees the value in it, when I think that that target is going to be easier for him to hit because you have weapons in Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, a terrifying running back in Breece Hall that can catch us out of the backfield. I think because of that, Tyler Conklin is probably going to be, they're going to say, hey, he's going to be the guy we can't cover. And because of that, Aaron Rodgers will have some easy ones. So I'm excited to see it. I see some other individuals have brought up Conklin as well. But with that said, what do you think the AFC East looks like this year when it's all said and done?
So I think it's a 2-horse race for number one between Buffalo and the Jets. I think you can coin flip it either way. I'm personally leaning the Jets right now. Obviously, they have to show it on the field, but I think on paper, it's the best roster in the division, top to bottom. Obviously predicated on, Tyron Smith staying healthy and Rodgers staying healthy and the defense being at the same level it was last year despite losing some pieces. And I think a lot of that comes to fruition. I think the Jets win anywhere from 10 to 12 games. I think they're battling Buffalo down the stretch for the AFC's title the entire season, and I think that they ultimately edge them out. When it comes to Buffalo, I think people are going to basically see the real Josh Allen stand up. If that's I think that's the best way I can explain it. You're going to see the real Josh Allen stand up. And what do I mean by that? Well, you're going to see the Cam Newton Superman type performance that Josh Allen has shown, but hasn't needed to consistently be every single game. This is a weaker Buffalo roster than in years past because of the Allen extension. They're more up against the cap. They got rid of Stephon Diggs. You're going to be working in Keon Coleman. And does Khalil Shakir take another step forward? A lot of these little questions along the offense and defense. But having a superstar quarterback gives you a floor that not many teams have in the NFL. I think, like I said, they're going to be battling with the Jets up and down the regular season. They're just going to miss the AFC East title, but they're definitely going to be a wild card team, in my opinion. That brings me to Miami. I am worried about Miami because Tua, after getting through a full season with the way that he operated, he cut the weight. And I understand that to an extent, I might be overreacting. But if I'm a player that had an extensive injury history, an extensive concussion history, and all of a sudden I'm switching up the one thing that might have helped me the most, or one of the things that helped me the most, I'd be concerned. And Miami's probably in an arguably a worse spot than Buffalo in terms of what they lost. Losing a lot of pieces, namely a guy like Christian Wilkins along that defensive line. Their main edge rushers in Jalen Phillips and I think Bradley Chubb is still there. They're both out or going to be not up to speed when the season starts. Their offensive line isn't as talented as it was in years past. You're looking at a lot of these different things, and Mike McDaniel is going to have to overcome a lot. Tua is going to have to overcome a lot. And when you have guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you're still going to have a baseline floor. You're still going to have a good offense. I just don't know if they have the overall team talent to compete with Buffalo and the Jets. And then that brings us to New England. They're in a rebuild. Drake May, I think, is going to be a very fun quarterback down the line. If I'm New England, I'm not playing him till at least mid-season. Let him get a nice runway to sit, learn, develop a little bit, get a few games in, and then year 2 becomes the year where he can fully hit the ground running. But that's basically where I fall with it. I think Jets 1, Bills 2, Miami 3, New England 4.
Okay, love that. Love that. I definitely love the Bills and Jets conversation on that one, right? I'm with you in terms of the Jets, right? I definitely am with you in terms of the Jets being up there in conversation. I do believe the Jets have the best overall roster, again, on paper. Doesn't matter if they don't put it all together when it comes to game days. But for me, man, I think the Miami Dolphins are actually the biggest competitor for the New York Jets. And I get what you're saying in terms of what they've lost defensively and offensively, but if we're being honest, I don't think they were winning games because of their defense last year, right? They weren't winning
that's
games
true.
because
That's
of that,
very
right?
true.
They were winning games because of the quick release of Tua, getting the ball into the hands of Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Raheem Mostert and Akane showed out last year. I did not expect Mostert to play a full season. He did. I didn't. This Akane kid came out of nowhere. I think McDaniel is possibly. I know he's the most talented offensive mind in the AFC East, and I think that is what's going to be their biggest superpower. The Miami Dolphins, to me, they worry me. And I look at the Buffalo Bills, like you were just saying. Listen, I think Josh Allen is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I do. I think when you put it all on Josh Allen's back, I think he tries to do too much. And when he tries to do too much, he makes a lot more mistakes. This is a guy also who led the league in interceptions last year, if I'm not mistaken. He was number 1 or number 2 in interceptions last year. So now you don't have those safety blankets of a Gabe Davis or a Stephon Diggs. And I know the Bills Mafia are trying to tell you, well, it doesn't matter. The last half of the year, we used our tight ends in our running game, completely eliminating the fact that, like, you still had Stephon Diggs on the field and Gabe Davis, which pulled defenses. They had to be respectful of the fact that those guys were there. So it made things a little easier for your running backs and for your tight ends to go ahead and make plays. But I digress. They'll figure that out this year where they become the primary targets. So I think they're going to be challenged. They're going to be significantly challenged. I do believe the changeup from their offensive coordinator to Joe Brady gave them a bit of an edge to go on that run. But now you got to go ahead and do it for a full season. We've got tape on it, and I think they're going to run into some issues. Their defense is not as talented as it once was. They lost a lot of big names, playmakers from their defense. They lost their center. They lost their wide receiver 1, their wide receiver 2. I look at those guys, man, and I think they got gutted. Then you go to the Dolphins, who on defense, they got gutted. And again, the whole Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips thing, that is concerning because they don't really have that edge presence. But I go back to the fact that I don't think their defense was the reason why they were winning games last year. It was their offense. They went and got OBJ as their wide receiver 3 this year. And people may talk crap all they want to. I don't expect OBJ to be the OBJ of freaking, times past. But that's still a pretty good wide receiver 3 for you to have on your roster. He's going to be good for 500-something yards. He can go ahead and get you some touchdowns. When you've got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle pulling double coverages, OBJ is going to do some damage. But then you also got Raheem Mostert. They got Akane, and they drafted the other kid too, the other running back, Wright, who is also a speedster, man. Like, I don't think Tua is great. I don't think Tua is elite. I don't think Tua is a top 10 quarterback in this league. But what I think Tua does do extremely well is know the spot he's supposed to get the ball to and get it there quickly, which means he's been able to avoid the impact of a faulty offensive line by getting rid of the ball as fast as possible. So I think going into this year, that's going to be the game plan, right? Get the ball into your playmakers as fast as you can. You've got several more now on the field with you at any given time. And I think they're going to be the one down the road that we're looking at potentially for the AFC East crown. I think ultimately we're just too much in terms of having the defense, having the special teams, and having, I would say, a top 10 offense. They'll probably have a top 5 offense in the NFL, but I think the rest of their roster, like you were saying, is going to fall towards the bottom half of the league, and that's going to be their downfall. I do believe we wind up pulling it off. But I got Jets taking the AFC East. Dolphins coming in close second, making a wild card. I got the Bills missing the playoffs this year. And I got the Patriots, like you said, man, they're rebuilding. They're just trying to figure some things out. I'm not a big fan of Drake May. I've been on record saying I think Drake May is just bigger Zach Wilson, and we're going to see that. I really don't think he can process the field very well. I see a guy who played mediocre competition. I see a guy who's got some nice mobility and made some really big arm plays in college and made a lot of people get excited. But when I look at him try to process the field, I was just like, I don't see it. This looks like Zach Wilson to me, but he's bigger and maybe a little bit faster. So maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not, but I'm not really impressed by Drake May. Well, I guess we'll see. What time will tell. But yeah, I got Jets, Dolphins, both making the playoffs. Then I got the Bills missing the playoffs this year. And then I got the Patriots bringing up the rear. Call me crazy, but for some reason or the other, I fear the Dolphins more than I fear the Bills. Plus, the Jets have had Josh Allen's number, it seems like, for a minute now. So I feel like, you know what I'm saying, that's going to be it. I'm not going to say we're only sweeping the Patriots. I think we're going to split with the Dolphins, split with the Bills, and then we'll probably sweep the Patriots.
I just think with Miami, right, it's a matter of, and I think there was a comment that said it, they really didn't beat a good opponent last season. And that offense really faltered against talented teams. I just think Buffalo's built better to compete against the better opponents in the NFL, in the AFC East than Miami. But I also see where you're coming from. Miami's speed is just overwhelming to some opponents and can literally swing the tides of games. I just think with that specific team and how they're constructed right now, that defense just gives me a ton of worries in the sense of, look, you can have as good of an offense as you want. If you're bleeding points on defense, there's going to be a certain point where you can't catch up with that. And then obviously Miami would have to set the tone, etc. But I just worry about the fact that they lost talent and that the talent they have there might not be playing at the level that it used to. And you have some major issues for them against the better opponents. Because I think against worse opponents, Miami's just going to overpower teams with their offense.
That's fair. That is fair. They did not beat. I think they only beat the Cowboys, which you would argue is the Miami Dolphins of the NFC. Yeah. So that's a good point. Yeah, when you put it that way, that is a good point. Man, I look at the offense, and I'm a big believer in McDaniels, man. I like him a lot. I think McDaniels has done some exciting things. We've seen him do some exciting things. So I look at what he can do, and again, going into year 3, he sees the field better. I'm pretty positive he's going to be able to put Tua in better positions to succeed. Yeah, I don't think their defense was that good last year, man. I know people swore they were great, but and they got the third hardest schedule or third easiest schedule, I guess, in the AFC East as well. Bills got the hardest, then somehow the Patriots, then us, then no. We have the easiest, right? We have the easiest schedule, central schedule in the AFC East. It's Dolphins with the second easiest, Patriots with the third easiest, and then of course Bills with the hardest. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm crazy, but I look at the Miami Dolphins, man, and I'm just like, yeah, they concern me, man. But yeah, listen, Brandon, we definitely went over what we had discussed. This was fun, man. We were chopping it up. I looked at the time and I'm like, oh crap! All right, we've definitively gone over. So my apologies for that, man. But hey, man, any last words? Anything you want to go ahead and tell the people? We've got about 130 people right now chilling with us. Any last words you want to go ahead and put out there about the Jets for this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be there's at least potential for a very exciting season. I think a lot of things are going to go right. And obviously, look, this fan base, it's been through a lot. A lot of people are going to look for the negative and things because that's just been the case. But I think it's okay for people to be excited. I think it's very okay for people to be anticipating a great season from Garrett Wilson, anticipating a great year from Rodgers or Breece Hall, anticipating a great year from the defense. This team has everything you need on paper. Once again, at the end of the day, it comes down to can they execute on the field. And outside of that, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast and can't wait to do it again.
Oh, most definitely, Brandon. I appreciate you, brother. Listen, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said can't wait to do it again because I will be reaching out to you again, man. This was awesome. Very insightful. Again, Brandon, you can see him on Jets XFactor. Is there any new articles that you're currently working on we should be keeping an eye out for?
Not just covering the practices. If there's something that I am writing up, I will let you guys know. The big one on the horizon that I'm thinking of, and this will probably be an interesting discussion point, is I'm working on an article basically saying that the Jets can't lose more than 3 games before their bye week. And if you look at the schedule and look at how things are constructed, post bye week is really crunch time for this team. And before the bye week, they're really only facing, and obviously it's before the season starts, so lots of things can change. They're only really facing 2 or 3 teams that were playoff teams. So this is a year where you can't have that typical Jets slow start. They have to really come out of the gates firing, even if that isn't necessarily week 1.
Okay, fair enough. I'll be keeping an eye for that article. Listen, his socials are in the description. You can go ahead and see him on Twitter. I found you on Instagram. Where else can the people find you, Brandon?
Twitter, Instagram. That's pretty much it. At BPOC24 for both of those. Appreciate all the support. And once again, thank you for having me on.
Brother, I appreciate you for coming on, man. Again, I will be sending you another invite, so I'm glad you already said you'd be down. Y'all heard it here first. He's willing to come back on the show, so I'll be reaching out to you, Brandon.
Sounds good to me.
You have a good night, brother.
You too. Peace.
Later. Well, that's the episode, y'all. That was freaking awesome. Brandon came out, shared some incredible insight with us. Again, all of his socials are in the description. Definitely go give him a follow on Instagram and on Twitter. I've been following him quite a bit and reached out to him. He was kind enough to go ahead and spend some time with us. Ultimately, man, listen, I think the Jet season is a promising one. I love the fact that so many individuals get so hyped and so agitated and look for any negative connotation they can use to kind of bump themselves up because, oh, man, hopefully Aaron Rodgers, you know what I'm saying, is that an event that he doesn't care about football, which is why he skipped Mando Mini Camp today, all this other crap, man. Like, I find it amusing that New York Jets fans can be hated this much, right, for a team that's so irrelevant, right? Everybody will tell you we're irrelevant, we haven't accomplished anything, and yet everybody and their mom is always in our Twitter spaces. Everybody and their mom want to go ahead and jump in front of a camera and talk about the New York Jets. And that's how you know what I'm saying, they hate us because they ain't us. It is what it is. Ultimately, the Jets right now this year, I think, have one of the best rosters we've seen in a very, very long time. I would not say it's the best roster of all time because I got into it with another Jets fan, an older Jets fan who argued and debated, mind you, very well that this isn't the best roster we've had. But I digress. In my lifetime, definitely one of the best rosters we've had. So I think we're going to do some good things this year. Season can't get here fast enough. We're about to go into the dead zone of freaking the offseason the next month or so. You're going to see a lot of just repetitive stuff. So we're going to go ahead and have a couple of hangouts, and I'm going to get some more guests. We're going to definitely have more of a group hangout where I'll be putting the link in the group chat, and then you can just jump on and we'll all just talk Jets about what's on our mind. But I appreciate y'all, man. 120, 130 of you right now in watching the stream with me. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate y'all support. Y'all the real MVPs. I got to go ahead and get my ass to bed. I got to get up early in the morning for work. And I just got back from freaking Fort Hood earlier this afternoon. So I'm a little tired. But I appreciate you guys chopping it up with me. The New York Jets are the real deal. For those of you guys who are freaking out, it's okay. I understand we all suffer from PTSD when it comes to this team. It's been a constant in terms of getting our hopes up and then taking it down a notch. But this year, the team is built the right way. We're talking about having security in terms of the offensive line. If anything goes wrong, we have a legitimate backup quarterback this year after Aaron Rodgers. Hopefully, we don't need to see any of that. We've got playmakers who can go ahead and support and not only support, but win competitively. This roster is built to actually make a push. So stop freaking out, man. We got to start believing. Let's start putting some more positive energy into the atmosphere, into the ether or whatever, the whole manifestation thing. Let's go ahead and start pushing some of that stuff because ultimately this should be a good season. This should be a good season. I'm going to speak it to existence, and there's nothing anybody can tell me that's going to go ahead and make me feel any other way. But again, I appreciate you guys. Y'all have a good night. As always, go Jets, and then I'll see you guys next